Helen Slinger and Eileen Mohan, our guests. Helen Slinger is the producer of the Gangster Next Door. It will show on CBC television at 9 o'clock this Thursday. Eileen Mohan's son was killed in the Surrey 6 slayings, and she's part of the documentary, and a brave thing you've done and a brave thing you continue to do. Take me to Abbotsford, because I think of Abbotsford as cows and Christians.
Churches.
And
Yeah, churches.
It's, you know.
It's still, God, I don't know if it still has the most churches per capita of any city, but it certainly did have at one point and has a lot of churches. I think what happened in Abbotsford is that people weren't paying attention. That this Abbotsford is, of course, if you watch your map or if you Google your way out from Vancouver to Abbotsford, Abbotsford is very close to the border and runs along the border.
Zero Avenue.
Zero Avenue runs for miles, and it's very easy to run drugs from there. But I think people weren't paying attention. There's a clip of a retired policeman in the documentary talking about a time when two administrators were sitting down looking in a dictionary for the definition of gang so that they could tell the public that Abbotsford didn't have a gang problem. And I think that's part of what happened. I think there were a whole number of factors that came together, and the one that I think capped it was perhaps the fact that the community just didn't want to have that reputation.
And the community was quite astounded. We'll take a look at it now.
It was the increasing level of violence, especially shocking in a community previously best known for having a world record number of churches. For 2 years in a row, bucolic Abbotsford would earn the dubious distinction of murder capital of Canada. Even teenagers were targeted, kids only marginally involved in the drug trade. Abbotsford's greedy young gangsters sent messages to their competitors in blood.
And that's from the Gangster Next Door. And Chief Bob Rich is in the documentary.
Yes.
He's the chief in Abbotsford. What does he tell you about what's going on today?
Well, what he tells you is that the community is out of denial today, and that's certainly happening. Eileen has met with Bob Rich too and can tell you that it's a completely different regime now. He had the dubious pleasure of coming in during the time that things were really, the violence was really at its height, and he came in from Vancouver too. So I think he had that advantage of seeing some of the things that had been happening in Vancouver when he went into position. But he has done two things. One is step up enforcement. They've created a gang suppression unit. But the other thing he's done is the kind of work that Eileen is also doing, which is working with all the soft stuff, going into schools, they created a bunch of ads with Abbotsford Police on no money, a bunch of ads that play at big hockey games that attempt to take the shine off the gang life. So
and
they're
when you
going
say
at it both ways.
Okay, take the shine off, how? Not showing a handsome young man with tattoos sauntering down the street or waiting to hop into a Ferrari, not that.
No,
That would take the shine off, but is it a tough love thing or what?
With the ads, the series that I really like they're modeled on those old American Express commercials, and they should take you through what gang life looks like, ending with spending the rest of your life in jail, senseless. So that's what they attempt to do, is they show you the consequences.
Very much so. And the consequences aren't dire enough for some of them, as you know so well. So what's the pecking order here? There were the Red Scorpions, United Nations gang. Is there an up-and-coming gang that they're really worried about?
I've heard two things, and one is the Jury brothers, who seem to be taking up, whenever law enforcement takes apart the gangs, there's another wave that comes along that tries to take the power, the drug money. So the Jurays, who were a group that were mentored by the early 90s Indo-Canadian gangs, they seem to be on the rise in Abbotsford. Police were looking at them. And I also heard quite recently that some remnants of the UN gang, it was big and powerful, and that it's still
multicultural
moving.
And proud to be so.
Yes. Eileen, have you heard anything more different than?
Well, I know behind all these gangsters, and no matter whether it's independent soldiers or UN or now the Dewberry brothers, the backbone behind them are the Hells Angels. And I think if we don't get rid of the Hells Angels, or actually call them a criminal organization in BC, and yet that has not been done in BC, we'll see Hells Angels working behind all these gangs very quietly. The organization is very structured. They have personnel in their organization who own legitimate businesses.
So in your opinion, some of these wannabe gangs are linked to the Hells, you think?
Definitely.
What do you think?
The UN gang was also linked to the triads, according to, again, the brilliant Vancouver reporter son.
Kimball and
Kimball.
Julian Scher has done amazing work on gangs and especially on Hells Angels, and I don't know the logistics of who's connected to whom, but I know drugs are the driving force behind most of it. Drugs, money,
Yeah, and it was the violence
human
was
trafficking.
The violence was caused by the mid-level gangs. Most of the mid-level gangs are believed to have connections, larger connections to the
Right.
Hells Angels or the triads.
Why has the violence escalated? It seems it's escalated. 50 gangland slayings last year.
2008, 2009, there was a big war between the UN gang and the Red Scorpions, and that really was the escalation, and that's what Chris was lost in, was that war. Now again, it's you take those guys out, and you create a vacuum, and you create a vacuum for money, for cash, for greed. So everybody jockeys for position again, and in the jockeying, there's often violence.
Sure.
as people
Well, as you
don't-
know, most of us feel fairly safe in this city. We do, not like in Chicago or Detroit. But when you see shootings in a shopping mall,
Well, these guys, when they're doing
Crossfire.
business, Fanny, when they're doing business, they don't call up a mediator and say, hey,
Right.
we have a little bit of problem in the marketplace here. Can we sit down and talk it through with you? It's not what they do.
no,
They do
I'm putting a hit on somebody. You don't call ahead. Say, hello, I'm going to, as soon as you find him, and if it's not him, shoot whoever's in the car. I don't think that's probably what they say, but it seems to be, you know, you can get caught.
It's the underline saying, take them all out. Yeah.
Yes. What about the young women? The women who love or like these men?
You know, women, for whatever reason, how much of this is the genetics of looking for the big macho guy, I don't know. But women have always been somewhat attracted to bad boys, it seems to me. And these are the baddest of the bad boys.
Sure.
And I can understand. Fanny, I know you probably had a pure youth, but I didn't
Of course I
entirely
did.
have a pure youth. So I can understand how you get involved in a relationship that you don't know where it's going. You don't think this guy, he's kind of interesting and a little
Right.
bit different, and you don't think that he's dealing cocaine, and you don't think that he's capable of killing somebody. And you get in and you fall in love, and in the documentary, there's a young woman that this happened to, who's a beautiful, educated young woman. You get involved, you're in love, you're trying a little bit of drugs, you're addicted to drugs, and suddenly you're driving for the boyfriend, and it all happened a little bit fast because the hormones.
Yes, and the pain of the mother who lost the daughter to the gang and then worries that the daughter will be killed. And in the old days, they didn't kill the women very often. Today, it doesn't seem to matter.
Less and less. There was, you may recall, there was a young woman who was killed, a wife of a gangster, who was killed with her 4-year-old son in the backseat.
Astounding. What did you learn from this, the process of putting this together, that you just didn't know? What shocked you?
I think what shocked me is back to this, how quite middle class it is. And again, not to say that it is entirely middle class, but how quite middle class some of these gangsters are, and how really nobody is immune to what can happen, whether it's Eileen living across the hall from a drug trafficker, whether it's Susan in the documentary, whose daughter, whose very middle class, smart daughter, got involved with the Red Scorpion. You're not immune, and it's not a them and us. You know, we are the us. It's all of our problems.
Very much so. Thank you.
Pleasure, Fanny, always.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Eileen Mohan and Helen Slinger, and the documentary on CBC is called The Gangster Next Door, Thursday night.